everybody. Hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm sitting here with not literally, he's on the other side of the world, but I'm sitting here virtually with my rather good friend, Mr. Kristian Kohle. How are you?
I'm really fine. The weather has been great today in Germany, and I've just released my guitar course that has been so much work for me, and I'm so happy it's out there. So it has been a great day so far.
Anybody that has ever watched a Kristian Kohle video, of which there's quite a few now, will know that he talks a lot. And when I mean a lot about guitar recording. Not just, plug in the amp, put a mic in front of it. Not just like, the difference between a vintage 25 and a vintage 30, the usual dumb stuff. No. You like, how many different speakers now have you worked with? Different companies you've gone through, analyzing and...
It's just 4 companies so far. So Celestion, everybody knows Celestion. But I was more interested in the other stuff, the unknown stuff, because Celestion is so dominant on the market. For a reason, because they make great stuff, but I wanted to try the other stuff. So I tried Jensen, and they make some great speakers. Even some speakers that really work well for high gain tones, and because Jensen is a brand that is rather known for 10-inch speakers in Fender combos. I tried a lot of Eminence speakers. Eminence is great, of course, and I tried WGS, and I think I had 30, 40 speakers here so far, and I tried them all, compared them all, blended them all. But it's so much fun. It's so much fun because, as you should have learned by now, the speaker is, I think, the most important part of your signal chain. It really changes everything.
Do you have a favorite? Gun to your head, if you only had one speaker, are you willing to say that?
Well, it used to be the Mesa Boogie voiced Vintage 30, but that's a boring answer because it's the industry standard in modern metal, or in metal for the last 20 years. And I'm very happy to say that I found a new favorite, and that is the Eminence DV77. I have done a video about it. I've even released an IR pack together with Eminence, really spontaneously, mainly because I just love that speaker. So that DV77 from Eminence, which is also the Mick Thompson signature speaker. Mick Thompson is the guitar player of Slipknot. It sounds like a warmer or less bright or fuller sounding Vintage 30. And check it out. I think they're finally available now.
Celestion, you've actually got some competition from somebody else in that arena then.
Yeah, isn't it funny that one company dominates the market like that? I mean, maybe it used to be the same with Neumann microphones like 30 years ago. There were, but I mean, there are thousands of companies that make guitar amplifiers. Just, look here, it's like all different companies. Yep. I don't know any 4x12 cab right now that is not loaded with either a Greenback or a V30 or maybe a K100, but they're all loaded with Celestion. And I don't know where is the guitar player asking for a Celestion, and if it's not Celestion, what do you think?
I don't know, but I do know, I always thought, at least when I grew up, I always thought it was the 25s that were the speakers. Because I remember, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but I always thought that was Hendrix's cab. I always thought he had 4 25s in it. So that was like the standard for me. And then, yes, about 20 years ago, I remember first coming to LA, and all the session players were like, no, you have to have Vintage 30 in your cab. So even if they came in with little 1x12 cabs to jam with, or track with, or I'm looking around, even if they had a combo with a single 12, they'd always switch it out and put a Vintage 30 in it.
I think in my case, after 25 years in the studio here, I have never had anybody bring a speaker that was not from Celestion. That drove me to make all those tests, because it didn't take me a lot of time to find out there are true alternatives out there, especially if you want to sound different, if you don't want to sound like everybody else. And the easiest way to change your tone is to swap the speaker. I was surprised how little speaker videos, or let's say well done speaker videos, I found on YouTube. And yeah, since then I kind of got hooked, I want to check out more and more speakers.
What you do takes a lot of time. I was talking to another channel. They had done some tests on a computer, and I was like, people don't do things like testing computers. They don't do things like testing speakers because it's like days of work. They'll like put on a track and talk about it and film it for 20 minutes and then put it up on YouTube 20 minutes later, you know. I think there's a beauty in putting in the time and the energy into this stuff. And I really admire what you do with speakers because, you know, there's a reason why those videos are successful because exactly as you say, nobody else is doing them and nobody else is taking the time and energy to do it. Which is why I'm excited that we did this course with you because I knew if we were going to do a guitar recording course, there's not going to be anybody more thorough than the very stereotypical German Mr. Kristian Kohle, who's going to take like 20 hours of information and condense it into 3 hours and 20 minutes like you did.
Yeah, right. I felt like I don't want to do a 10-hour course. So I really try to compress everything, you know, so it's...
But you spent weeks filming something to make it only...
Yes. I just wanted...
It's amazing.
Packed information, you know, like no nonsense. But it turned out great. I'm trying to teach people to have some kind of vision and some kind of structure in their tone finding. And I think that is the main difference of this course compared to other courses that I've watched. I believe it is not necessary, but it is very helpful to create some kind of vision about where you want to go. I've seen too many guitarists in my life who could play guitar, but didn't really know where they want to go, didn't have any idea about their tone. And so if you know where you want to go, by the way, that doesn't mean you can't go somewhere else along the way, no problem. But if you know where you want to go, and the second thing I'm teaching is if you know your gear, if you know everything you use, you will be a lot more effective, a lot faster, and you will probably also find better guitar tones than before.
But I will say there's tons of detail in your course. Your idea of not that much detail is most people's mind-bogglingly explode.
But details are important, you know, but that's the next step for me. You need to be able, as a producer, or as a studio guy, but also as a musician, it's helpful to, you know, take a step back and to see the whole picture, to understand if a song is good or not, because you don't have to fiddle around with the hi-hat if the song sucks. And it's the same thing with the guitar tone. So if you go into a wrong direction that is not working, you know, it makes no sense to try 15 different amps if you're not going into the right direction. If you have decided to use way too much gain or whatever, a wrong decision that's not working for the song, you know, no detail work will compensate that mistake later. So that's what I'm showing. And like I'm working on 3 songs from 3 different metal genres. So I'm taking a modern metal song, I'm taking a death metal song, and a vintage hard rock kind of song, all very different from each other. And I'm showing everything from scratch. I have the DIs and I have a vision. I think I know where I want to go, and then I just start trying stuff. And what I want to show people is, first of all, they can see what I do, and they understand how I get my results. But the interesting part is that there is not much detail work in the end. I'm showing them like the final mix, and I'm not needing 50,000 plugins to repair the guitar tones, you know, some reverb here, a little EQ there, some compression there, but basically not much. And that is because I made the right decisions, you know, here when I dialed in the amp, you know, and that is so important because it actually makes your life a lot easier. You understand what I mean?
No, it makes perfect sense. No, I remember talking to Mike Plotnikov about this, about guitar tones, and I asked him, do you use any EQ on the console? He's like, no, I do everything on the amp. If I want the amp to be brighter, darker, fatter, thinner, it's all done there. He's like, all I'm doing is capturing the sound of the amp.
Same with arrangements, if I can say that. Like when I'm recording guitars, I'm always trying to do some mix work in the recording process. That means if I want one part to be bigger sounding, the chorus or some other part, I will add some additional guitars, either a double or an octave or something. So later in the mix, everything just naturally, you know, has the right energy flow and the right balance. That's the better way of doing things, you know, just arranging it correctly, finding the right tones from the get-go. And here it just helps to know what you're doing. I know that a lot of very famous guitar tones are just, you know, accidents, and that happens all the time. You know, something goes wrong, and so that is totally fine.
You're bringing up an amazing point You see, I almost feel like, and this is not a metal analogy at all, but I remember Joe Pass being asked a question where they were asking him about guitar playing and all this kind of stuff. And he goes, one thing he says that confuses me about guitar playing, he's like, why do guitarists spend 99% of their life learning how to play solos when 99% of their life they're playing rhythm? And I think the same could be said here, because when you were talking about famous guitar tones, I get it. When I think of famous guitar tones, and I am the proof of my statement here. I'm always going to think of like, you know, a wah sound with Hendrix or that, you know, whatever. The point is I'm going to think of like, Johnny Greenwood, you know, playing some really fast thing and some weird, or that's what you get caught up in. You get caught up in like the icing thing. But the reality in heavy music and any classic rock is it's the rhythm tones or the riff tones. You get that right, you got the bed of the song right.
And by the way, I still can't play any solos. I just can't play jugu 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 jugu. So I'm the exact opposite. I never cared. I never cared for solos, and I do care for solo tones though, because I have to mix them. But yeah, you're right. And the more you have some kind of plan, I think the better it is. But what I was saying was like, accidents happen, you know, or that some random stuff happens. You know, you reamp something through the wrong amp without noticing, and suddenly it sounds better than what you dialed in before, or you're on the wrong channel and you don't notice, or somebody kicks a mic and it suddenly sounds better. If something like this happens, go for it. That is fantastic. Yeah, but in the end, that's the German takeaway from what I'm saying is that accidents are cool, but you know, you can't
plan for them.
Build a studio business based on accidents or something. That's not going to work. Better make your homework and know what you're doing, and that's what I'm trying to teach in that course. Be a little more German when it comes to guitar tones.
But how did you get into recording anyway? I've never asked you that.
Kind of a boring story, just like everybody else, you know. Just I found out pretty quickly that I preferred like the studio side to the live side. I still like playing live and stuff, but I preferred that because that had something magic. And I remember my first real recording sessions that I did myself were when we had this in the next village here in Seeheim. They had this youth club, you know, where teenagers go to play pool or darts or something, and they had a 4-track Fostex tape or cassette recorder, 4-track cassette recorder, and that was basically not used. So I made a deal with a guy running the place that I could go there each Tuesday for 2 hours, and because everybody was like listening to music and playing darts and stuff. And by the way, nobody liked me there. You know, they were older, and so when I entered, it was like going into a saloon in a Western movie, you know, like, and then the music stopped. It was like that. So I was like, ooh, very insecure. And they gave me some kind of, it wasn't even a room. It was some kind of closet, you know. And I had a table and a chair and that 4-track machine and some headphones and my guitar. And then they closed the door for 2 hours. And I remember those 2 hours every Tuesday are still some of the most magic and most joyful moments of my life, because that was the first time where I could do overdubs. You know, I could play something and then I could add something later.
You're painting this picture of like an 1800s German village, you know, where everybody's wearing lederhosen and they're like all so poor, and they've got this one like Fostex X15, you know, which they share between the whole village, and you got your 2 hours a week locked in the closet, recording your guitars with your
it's true. It's basically true, because, you know, it's like I was 14 or 15, you know, so and that stuff was pretty expensive back then, you know. I couldn't afford it, yeah, and but I also remember, to make it even worse, I remember I had to walk. After those 2 hours, I had to walk to take the bus to my village. And that took me something like 40 minutes because I had to carry my guitar and my combo amp, you know, through the snow in winter. But it was worth it, because I could record 3 guitars and 1 vocal. And that was so cool. And I think that was the time when I decided to, you know, I want to do something like this every day. This is so cool. This is magic. Some point I could buy my first 4-track Tascam tape recorder, and then I bought an ADAT, and then I bought more ADATs, and then, times have changed, right? It's
times have changed.
Technically, well, the irony is, I think that, we went through a digital revolution with guitar tones, of course. So we started with those amps back then, with tube amps and very heavy stuff, and then came the pod, and then came the first plugins, and then came the Camper, which for me was the game changer, or the first digital tool that I used for guitar tones, the Camper amp. And now we have plugins, and we have IR packs and all that fancy stuff. But the irony is still for me is that if you talk about the actual tones and how people want to sound, nothing has really changed. That is interesting, that all those plugins, if Neural DSP release a new killer plugin, or if you use the Camper, or whatever you do, all is based on the technology and on the tones, from back in the days. Isn't that ironic?
I have this conversation a lot, and you're opening a huge can of worms with me. It's like, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, because I'm sitting in front of an SSL console and some Pultecs and some Neve, some BAE, some API, But the one thing about plugins that drives me a little nutty, and that kind of thinking, is that everything should be a copy of something. To me, it's like, I feel like we've moved on in the technology. So if you're going to open a plugin, instead of just making it a compressor, it really should have like 50 different sounds inside of it. Because why does I don't want to be speaking out of turn, but why does a 13-year-old kid starting to use their first DAW really need to know what an LA2A is anymore? As much as I love LA2As, and there's some really good emulations, it's a little bit like, But when you turn on the Neural DSP, it's just like, oh, that's a whole different sound. It's a different way of working and thinking. So the thing about recording your own guitars is you get to be your own boss. You get to be your own creative. What am I going to do? You get to like bring yourself to the party. One of the problems with these with plugins, as much as I love them, is like, I'm like, that sounds amazing, let's just use that. And then you realize you've used it 50 times.
And that's why I still prefer, but that's just me, to do the real thing. I'm in the situation that I can easily do that because I have the room, I have the microphones, just like you. But I prefer to do that because it keeps me away from getting lazy, and I'm... not using preset number 55 again, that I've been using all the time on the Camper or on the plugin. I'm, chasing a new tone and finding something new. That's why I still use the real gear, because it inspires me more, even if the plugins might sound the same or not, But in the end, I don't care what people use, but the key is to get inspired by gear. That is, I think,
I agree.
The most important part. It's just funny. I'm waiting for the new guitar tones, because everything Neural DSP releases, as great as it is, now they just released a Soldano. That amp is from 82 or something. I don't know. That's just very old technology, great emulation. Of course, it still sounds great, but compared to, even in the plugin world, we see new stuff coming out, like a plugin like Soothe, for example, that everybody's using. That is just stuff that you can't do in the analog world.
Yeah, there's so many variables. So many variables. You've got the cab, the mic pre, the compressor, the EQ, the positioning of the mic, the EQ, how the EQ affects how the mic works. There's lots of things that cannot be emulated beyond, also, quite frankly, just the creative process, the variables, the randomness. And I think the longer we go on in the digital world, which we all love, obviously the convenience of it is so much better than I love my tape machine. It's sitting over there. I love you, AAT. But, the convenience of digital is not going away. We're not going to return back to tape.
No. I love the convenience of digital. Don't get me wrong. That's awesome. Yep. It's just a matter of what inspires you. In other cases, I hardly use any hardware EQs and compressors anymore, basically because I can work with the digital stuff. I even prefer the workflow of the fat filter EQs and that kind of stuff compared to the hardware. I just love it. I don't care. So no hardware for me. Why? Because I'm faster and I get more inspired by a Fab Filter EQ than by a real Pultec these days. That's why I go for digital EQs. In the amp world, in my case, it's different. I know that I will get better and more interesting results if I use the real thing, So whatever inspires you to do something unique, I would say. It's not only about being effective these days, it's about being unique now that everybody can afford the same gear, whatever makes you, inspires you and makes you sound unique, that's where you should go. That's what I believe. Analog, digital, who cares?
Can I ask you something a little bit more pinpointed? Like when you're recording heavy guitars, for instance, I notice sometimes when people send me stuff to mix or stuff they want me to, check out that they've recorded, they always seem to be recording a super heavy guitar and also compressing it, which makes absolutely no sense to me. Is that something that is that one of the sort of main faults that you see people do?
It is one of the mistakes, and I agree. So I never compress any high gain metal guitars because they're already, compressed as there's nothing more compressed than a high gain metal guitar. So I don't do that. I see that a lot. Technically, I see a lot of bad sounding DI tracks, with where I can hear their refrigerator or their laptop or there's something in the background. And as soon as even if you don't hear that noise in the DI, as soon as you send that DI through one of those machines over there, it will be amplified by, 1,000 times or something. So you will hear everything. That is also very problematic sometimes that people can't record proper DIs, or they are either noisy or distorted. Those are two typical problems. I mean, you can also get away with that sometimes. The main problem for me most of the time, if people make their own guitar tones, is what I said in the beginning, that they have no idea and no real vision about where they want to go. That is the problem. That you feel like they just went for whatever is hip at the moment, whatever the internet told them, whatever their favorite guitar player is doing at the moment or something like that, without really thinking what is good for them. And I know that's not easy, but that's what I'm trying to tell people. It's like people should start thinking more or analyzing music a lot more, analyzing sound, analyzing guitar tones a lot more to find out what their taste is, because everybody has taste. Find out what you like and why you like it. And then analyze your own gear and try to find out how can you get closer to that kind of tone that you have in your head. And that way you create interesting guitar tones, not by just, buying the gear your favorite guitarist plays or buying the gear that, is the most hippest thing on a Facebook group right now or something. That's what I see. People don't know what they want. I mean, that's why you hire people like us, right? So
sure.
Just send them a few DIs. People will tell me like, hey, can you make me sound very brutal and aggressive and fat and blah? I said like, yeah. Then I see like, okay, there's no real vision there. That means I have to come up with some kind of vision. And that's what I do when I reamp guitars and when I mix an album. So they send I'm doing the job of finding a cool guitar tone for them. You can hire people to do that, but hey.
I remember when I first started recording, I did just want to sound like what was out there that I really admired. I mean, I wasn't like in love with crap music. I mean, I loved really great music. I loved really, experimental meets, popular meets everything. I mean, I have high standards. I want it all, And I do wonder if that's possibly what happens with people is that they just think, well, if I can emulate what's huge and successful, then I can learn that. And then I can go off and start getting creative from there. I think one of the things is that now that is the easy thing to do. The easy thing to do is to sound like everybody else. Where it used to be, for when we started, at least when I started, really hard because
impossible almost.
Because even I could afford a 57. That was a cheap mic, but I didn't have a Neve 1073. I sure as heck didn't have an 1176. And I didn't have a 2-inch tape machine. So,
by the way, don't get me wrong. So there's nothing wrong about when you're starting out to emulate what you love. I mean, there's nothing wrong about that. But at some point, you should reach a point, where you are let's say, sonically grown up. And where it's not about like copying stuff all the time, where it's about, finding out what you want. And in the beginning, especially to learn something, it's always great to copy certain tones. I mean, I still do that these days. Sometimes I try to copy a certain tone just because I think it's interesting. But I do that to go somewhere else. And that is the difference. So in the beginning, of course, in that learning period, try to copy everything you love, perfect. But then at some point, turn it into something individual and something unique. That's the difference.
I did ask you what your favorite speaker is. What's your favorite mic? If you only had one mic to record guitars, what is it?
So that would be the 57. I'm sorry, that's a very boring answer, but I just love the 57 on guitars. And I used to love it on drums as well. The funny part is that I'm using a lot of like what I call modern sounding dynamic microphones from companies like Audix, MicTech, SE Electronics, very often with a neodymium magnet, so they're faster sounding, and I really like that.
Punchy mid-range,
Exactly. On drums, they're just faster sounding, and they sound a little brighter and give you what you need for a metal drum sound. But whenever I try those microphones on guitars, they have a certain hardness that has nothing to do with the frequencies, but it just feels like the microphone is a little too fast or something. So I always go back to the 57. But what I do is I blend the 57 with a lot of other stuff. And sometimes I also use other stuff. So it's not just the 57. But if there was only one microphone, Desert Island, 57.
Okay. Mic pre, does that change? Or do you have one that's like a go-to mic pre for you?
I like using either APIs because to me, they are the tube screamer of mic pre, so to say. They always add some kind of a little bite, to your tone. And if I don't use APIs, I will just use something more transparent. But most of the time, if you want those metal guitar tones that cut through, I'm using APIs. I have been using this Warm Audio API copy that I'm talking through at the moment, by the way, over there, WA412, and that one also sounds really nice and costs a lot less than the original API stuff. Am I allowed to say that? Yeah, I hope so.
Compression? Are you a distressor person? I'm trying to
totally. Yeah, I love distressors. I love distressors because I'm talking through a distressor right now as well, through the opto mode, because it's the most idiot-proof thing ever. To me, it even does the LA2A thing better than an LA2A thing without all the drawbacks. Wonderful compressor, but I'm not using compression on distorted guitars like we said earlier, right? Yep. What's your favorite compressor?
I'm looking
more difficult,
around.
Right?
Well, I mean, probably, I think like any classic engineers, if they only had one compressor, it would be an 1176. But I think the modern answer is a distressor. But the thing is like the distressor is, as you're pointing out, it's probably the most versatile hardware compressor ever made. It can sound like an 1176. It can sound like, as you're saying, it does the LA2A thing. It does nuke and all buttons in, just unbelievable. It does all the fun things as well as sounding subtle. Fun-wise, if it wasn't the 1176, fun-wise, it's probably the 610 Spectrasonics. That, I think I've got to get you one of those. I just love it. You'll find a lot of like the Nashville guys love it. A lot of like, people that are really trying to impart a sound, like really do something unique to the guitar sound. But the thing is, you're all about the source. You're all about like, how can I make the source sound and how can I get that sounding good and then capture it? I put that on an acoustic guitar because it kind of shimmers, and every time you play a light arpeggio, it kind of goes pang, 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 pang. It sort of explodes and jumps out of the speakers, where that's all being done by you on the amp side.
Yeah, but still, I mean, I'm also recording acoustic guitars, so show me that compressor. I like character compressors. I even like like those very extreme compressors. I'm using only the plugins, like the Devil Lock compressor from Sound Toys, which is a copy of that old Shure. What is it called? Level Lock or something. I love the SSL. The in the console, the talkback. What is it called? Talkback. Listen back compressor. Yeah. That one is just. I use it all the time, because it sounds like a telephone effect and distortion and compression at once. So I love character compression.
Do you use the bus compressor, SSL bus compressor?
Yes. Oh yes. I even use the hardware still. I'm not using the original, because I have one with a blendable like dry wet control, and with a slightly changed side chain as well. But I have 2 hardware compressors sitting here. One is always on my drum bus. I never touch it. It's just always there, and I always use it on every recording. And if you don't touch it, you have the recall. I think that's what CLA is doing with all its compressors, right? Just don't touch them. Just drive them with your digital signals, and that way they are always recalled.
It depends, maybe if you're genre specific, maybe that is okay. Maybe if you're the metal mixer guy, people want the Kristian Kohle metal mix sound. But I think obviously for a lot of mixers now that are working between multiple genres, they can't have a one-size-fits-all because... No.
Yeah, in my case, it's like, especially when I record drums myself, I have a very kind of special-sounding drum room, live room, and that compressor is also part of my drum sound. So it's always turned on. Even when I pull up the first overhead mic during the sound check, it always goes through that compressor. So I don't even know how my drums sound without that compressor. It has become like a part of me, just like the room over there. I always record with that room, and I always use that compressor. But I agree. Sometimes I just mixed a synthwave track, by the way, like 80s synthwave stuff, and I was not using that. I was not using that compressor on that track. Okay, I agree.
But that's amazing.
For my standard sounds so negative, but for my typical signature kind of drum sound, I will use that compressor with those settings. I will show it if I do a drum course one day. I will show it.
I thought you were doing a drum course.
Yeah. I mean, we're working on an academy, right? So I'm preparing some stuff there. Yeah. So I'm preparing some. So much, so little time.
I know, so much to do, so little time. Well, Kristian, this has been absolutely amazing. The course, of course, or I should have said natürlich, the course is, there's a link for it down below there. So check it out. Check out the course. It's rather wonderful. I mean, I learned a crap ton. Like I said, it feels like a 10-hour course condensed to 3 hours and 20 minutes. There's so much information in there. And no matter what genre you're in, it doesn't matter. This is a guitar recording course. Yeah. We're talking about metal because it's a little alien to me, but in a classic rock world, there's a whole sequence of stuff on recording classic rock tracks. Now, wait, there's multi-tracks to all 3 songs, isn't there?
Yeah, you can. So you're getting both the DIs, you're getting the backing tracks, but they're pre-mixed, so you don't have to fiddle around with them. Yeah. And then you're getting the DI tracks. That's what I want you to do if you get the course. I want you to find your guitar tones and use those DI tracks to, do something cool with them. But then you will also have my reamp tracks, sometimes several tracks, several versions, so you can compare them and you can really understand what I'm doing in the course. Because
fantastic.
Yeah, the most important takeaway or thing is that I want people not to copy what I do, but to find their own guitar tones. And I'm just trying to show them the methods how to get there.
Well, thanks ever so much for joining us. See you very soon. I'm sure we'll be talking very soon.
Absolutely.
So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen.
Alles Gute aus Deutschland. Bye-bye.
Tschüss. Goodbye.